It's time to learn some Rapier techniques. Good morning, it's Brutalizer, here for a long one. We'll be studying pages from the book Renaissance Swordsmanship by John Clements. The rapier most notorietous for its thrusting power, and most infinite for its lack of cutting power. While researching on YouTube, apparently there is a few katana kenjutsu practitioners who think that because the blade is so thin, they'll just simply chop it in half with their katana and leave the fencer helpless. And I want to say, as a man who owns a rapier himself and has used it to pierce through water bottles after sharpening it with a diamond file, I must say those kenjutsu enjoyers will have a long metal prod in their heart if they ever got in a real fight against a real fencer. The rapier, although not the thickest weapon, nor the most durable, can still maintain a lot of force when cut at. And if you be reckless against it, well, you might not be able to use your arm anymore, as this thing can cleanly pierce through bone and put a hole in your head without the need of any special ammunition. A bow and arrow wishes it could be this effective. Typically in fighting manuals it is paired with either a dagger or a buckler, but we'll be focusing on techniques focusing on one-handing a rapier, without any extra sidearms. Let's begin with the fundamental stances. What you see is the high guard, not really something you see a lot of when fencing, but it may be better fits when going against other weapons. The proper stance is that which is most effective and comfortable for the user, with the shoulder relaxed, knees slightly bent, and elbow not too far out or too close in the body. It's about keeping balance and staying relaxed while having your rapier up to your head, presumably in reaction to an overhead strike. The next stance is middle guard. From the middle guard, the sword is pointed at the adversary's midsection or chest. It's a common stance, and in Hellish Quart, if you don't press any buttons, your character will stay in this stance most of the time. Next stance is low stance, known as terza, and held more horizontally. This one is clear, you use it to guard against lower attacks, blocking leg snipes and the like. Next stance is called outside, or open guard. Theoretically, this stance could be used on a normal sword, but it would likely not be as effective as a rapier. This stance only works because of how lean the rapier is. And the last one is high outside. I'd say this is the better high stance when fencing. We see in Hellish Quart a lot of alternation between these stances, specifically middle guard and high outside. However, you can extend your guard outwards and press down to enter a low stance. However, there is another stance called Ungod. You probably know it from classic movies, but in real fencing, what Ungod is facing your hand towards the enemy, raising it above your head, and moving your arm backwards. The position is mainly for maintaining balance, and also to keep your hand out of the way, as a sudden thrust from a rapier is very common. But you keep your hand open, specifically so you can grapple, if you find yourself in a position where you need to do that. You don't see many depictions of fencers doing this with daggers. I believe this is because on guard is mainly meant for grappling. If you have something else in your hand, then you should of course bring it to your front so that you can use it against your opponent. Also, while on guard, you should put most of your weight on your rear foot, because when thrusting, for a good stab, you're going to use your rear foot to elevate your body forward to leave a good thrust, so lean back on it. In order to get good at Hellish Quart, you need to know the appropriate fighting distance when going against a weapon, so that you know when to back up or when to move forward when your opponent moves against you. The image you see is the spacing or the fighting distance of the rapier when going against another rapier. As a rule of thumb, I just say, don't let the opponent's tip of the blade pass the middle of your blade. If they do, then you should either attack really quickly, or back up, or both. Otherwise, you may as well just be wielding a dagger for better speed and effectiveness at close range. There's a few ways to parry a rapier. The easiest and most common is just to knock your opponent's rapier aside in a wide diagonal circle, commonly seen with nearly all weapons. However, something unique with rapiers when going against rapiers, or other thrusting weapons, is because of its length and its commonly protected handle guards. It allows you to do a quick maneuver, where you can do a quick circle motion without moving your arm very far, and thrust into your opponent's arm or chest, instead of a large wide circle that often is used in slashing weapons to knock away the opponent's sword. Instead, you keep it there, and have the potential to poke your opponent in a flash, if they overcommit to a thrust. It's something that is unique to it, and displays weapon control, if you do manage to pull it off. There are other parries against larger weapons too, although only in a smaller section of the book. There is a depiction of a rapier blocking a spear aside, and by knocking it aside like so, you can close the gap between you and the spearman. And there's another with two-handed swords like the Zweihander, where it states that the two-hander cannot afford to be bound and caught up against a rapier due to its fast maneuverability, so he must be slow and careful when facing the rapier. However, at the same time, a rapier should be careful not to let his opponent overpower his parry, because the weight of the weapon might hit the rapier side, so it is advised to evade their attack or use a muffler. But back then there were special gauntlets when facing a rapier that was used to catch the rapier fencer's blade, because the rapier is very thin like a saw blade, and so you're going to end up cutting yourself if you try to hold on to it barehanded. There were other weapons used like the sword catcher to get around this problem with the rapier, but all in all, as long as you don't take a thrust from it, you'll likely survive the rapier slash. It was the thrusting techniques that went deep into the opponent that caused the rapier to be scary. Yes, you'll likely be able to keep going in a fight, presuming you can push through that pain of getting stabbed, which, if you're being real with yourself, is very unlikely, unless you're already overwhelmed with adrenaline. But even if you do keep fighting, and you do even take down your opponent after getting thrusted at, what is going to kill you is not the blade, but the infection that comes after it, as deep infections in this time period were untreatable. Internal bleeding is untreatable, and that is what is meant when it is said that many people in the medieval ages died from infection. They did not have the capability to treat internal organs that would often be pierced. Deep wounds often meant death. And a rapier thrust is really good at getting deep if you are fighting it unarmored. So remember, it was not light infections on the skin at the surface that was dangerous. It was the infections that went into internal organs that messed you up. Even if you miss the internal organs, it can still mess you up if a rapier pierces all the way through you. And you're likely to simply die after the fight, rather than during the fight. Pretty brutal when you take into perspective. When I learned that, it really made sense why this became an extremely common weapon for civilian use. I would not want to be pitted against this thing during that time. But that's a few techniques on the rapier. I hope you enjoyed the video. There has been some delays on my shipment towards full body tracking. As of recording this, it has not shipped yet, and I spoke to the seller about a week ago, and he had said there has been a delay on his supplies. Blade and Sorcery needs full body tracking. There's more techniques I want to show, so I'm going to be doing more rapier videos in the future. It kinda sucks because what I wanted to do this week is being delayed heavily. What I want to do with full body tracking is not only show off the stances, since Half Sword doesn't really have them, and also do takedowns, grapples, and throws by using my feet to kick in Blade and Sorcery. Specifically too, I want to go back to the dagger video, since many of those techniques involve throws and tripping, which I just simply cannot perform in Half Sword. Nor is there any footage of it in Hellish Quart. So we'll see how the shipping goes, and I will see you next time. Stay brutal, brutal knights.